So there's a lot of chatter on the internet these days about how historical romance is dead. And I think we know that's not true because we three are not dead and we are reading and writing historical romance. Do you have any theories or perspectives on what romance readers who don't read historical romance get wrong about historical romance? Like, what is keeping them from picking up a historical romance?
I can tell you, I don't think it's the covers.
Yeah, I don't think it's the covers either. I have a lot of theories. I'm not an expert on this at all. I think one of the things is you used to, when you went to the grocery store and you would check out, you would see a mass market paperback of a historical romance. It's like you could just grab one at the supermarket. And I do think traditional publishers are going more for like that larger size and it's more expensive. If it's more than $10, you're not going to just grab one and toss it into your basket. You know what I mean? So I honestly think that's part of it. I think there was a feeling that it was I don't want to say disposable, but like mass market paperbacks were supposed to be disposable, right? They were supposed
Hmm.
to be, that's what they're called, pulp novels. They're pulp paper. You buy it. It's not supposed to be kept forever, even though now, of course, people are collecting step backs and things like that. But I think that's part of it. I think there's a price point issue, honestly. I think that a lot of social media doesn't focus on it. And to be 100% honest with you, I think historical romance is more progressive than contemporary romance. So I do think some people who are not as comfortable reading books that have to think about the politics of the era in which they're written, I think people might be less comfortable with that. That's just my opinion. I have seen people write posts or write arguments that say, oh, you might think that historical romance isn't progressive, but guess what? It's really great. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't think that the people who aren't reading it are looking for a really like diverse, progressive genre. They want to read a book about a billionaire who buys you everything and that's it, you know?
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. And it makes me think about how in historical romance, we understand that the structure of marriage is something that there wasn't a lot of room around. Like, if you wanted to have property or have wealth or have anything, well, you couldn't do it on your own. Hopefully, you'd find a husband who'd be generous and nice to you, and then maybe he'd die, and then maybe you could do it on your own. In contemporary America, you don't need to find a partner to be fulfilled in any way except for romantic fulfillment, if that's what you want. So when we're in historical romance and the stories are centered around finding someone you love and oh, it's going to end up in marriage. I mean, obviously there are exceptions where it doesn't end up in marriage, but you're still like very much within that structure. You're either doing it or you're not doing it, and that has to be part of the plot. That's not like this patriarchal structure is good. It's just saying these are the limitations you're stuck with. How are you going to deal with it? But when we are still using that as the main plot for a contemporary romance, in a way, it's actually not problematizing the patriarchy. It's reaffirming the patriarchy. And so it's calling to different readers, maybe.
Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
specifically Mr. Impossible, which is, as you mentioned, very old. She's a widow. And so part of what's textual is she doesn't need to marry to have economic stability and to have respect in society. She's like in her late 20s and can make money in her own name. She's not respected because she can't publish her intellectual findings, but it's got nothing to do with her being a man's pawn specifically in her personal life. And I think you're right. There's an inherent acknowledgement of that inequity in historicals that contemporaries. I don't like contemporaries, so I'm the wrong one to sort of ask this question to because I don't understand why people aren't only reading historical. But you're right. I think contemporaries don't problematize our society to the extent that historicals are willing to problematize not just their own context, but our society too.
Yeah. And I think also, I don't think dark romance used to be its own genre. I think the place where you found dark romantic themes was in historical romance. There was kidnapping, there was piracy, there was, like all these,
Subcon.
yeah, all these like wild things that would happen. And I think I can still read some of it in a historical context because I'm like, okay, well, this is it's a historical context, so I can kind of distance myself from that. But when I read it in a contemporary context, for me personally, I'm like, it's a little too close to home. I'm not interested in reading about a stalker romance. Whereas, I mean, we talked about a Claypus book. What book was it? One of the ones in the Hathaway series with Harry Rutledge. And we were like, why did he fall in love with her? I was like, if you had only stalked her a little bit, I would like maybe understand. I was like, oh, but I was like, why wasn't he watching her from afar? Why wasn't he like, researching her? And so I can do that in this historical context, right? So I honestly think that there are like dark romance readers, but no, they have their own dark genre. They don't have to go to historical to find that.
Well, is there something specific about historical romance that you think just delivers for you differently than any other genre?
Meg and I have had this conversation. For me, I don't like reading anything contemporary or too close to contemporary because for me, that is like not escapist at all. Like I'm too busy rationalizing how I think something would actually happen. So I need something to either be so far in the past or in another world, be it sci-fi or fantasy, to actually immerse myself in the text. Not to say I have never liked a contemporary ever, but on the whole, I find them a lot harder to get lost in.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely part of it for me. I don't know. I'm just not. I was talking to someone else about it, and I was like, why does a duke work for me, but a billionaire doesn't work for me, right? And I'm just not interested in a billionaire romance. I'm like, what did he do to his employees to get there? Where I mean,
Right.
dukes did the same thing. I get it. Like dukes are also not like ethically amazing
But I refuse to accept
people.
the concept of an ethical billionaire where I'm willing to accept a ethical
Right.
18th century duke. Like I'm willing to like
Exactly.
suspend disbelief for that, but I'm not willing to suspend disbelief for an ethical billionaire.
But the other thing for me that I really like, both about historical romance and also about science fiction specifically, is that I think they can take an outside view of current society and make you think about it a different way. So it's something I like about both of those genres.
Yeah. For me, you're able to see patterns from your own life on an individual level and also on a societal level. And I don't know, it somehow gives you the distance so that it's more of like an intellectual exercise
Yeah.
for me personally.